back for another week of Behind the Lens. I'm Debbie Elias, film critic, creator, and host of Behind the Lens, where we go behind the lens and below the line with all those movers and shakers, the film and TV makers, those producers, directors, writers, actors, cinematographers, production designers, costume designers, VFX gurus, sound editors, sound mixers, film editors, composers, and every once in a while, a book author on which things get adapted. And we're going to have an author with us later in the show today because my colleague, my many-year colleague, my friend, Scott Huver, you probably know him best for his bylines in People magazine from his little red carpet interviews that he grabs in and about Hollywood. But now, if you're listening to this or on adrenalineradio.com or on the Adrenaline Radio Facebook page, you can see the crappy Mevo video. But this is Scott's book. It is Beverly Hills Noir, Crime, Sin, and Scandal in 90210. I am so tickled for him. He has been working on this for so long. I was lucky enough to have seen the early galleys of it. I am so thrilled that he's going to be joining us to talk about this little gem. There is something here for everybody, and there's a lot of stuff that many of you who like to be in the know that you're going to want to know. So Scott's going to join me at the midpoint of the show. But first, there are no words. There are no words for this first interview. The other day, I spoke with Paul Reiser and Colm Meaney, the two stars of their new film, The Problem with People. Directed by Chris Cottam, written by Paul and Wally Marzano Lesnovich, stars Colm and Paul, Jane Levy, and then some wonderful Irish actors. It is filmed in Ireland, and it is in Ireland because Paul Reiser always wanted to go to Ireland, and he decided the only way he would get there is if he writes a movie or something set there so he can go. And that's exactly what he did. And the story premise, I think a lot of us can actually relate to a part of this with relatives that came from Europe or for some other country. But here we have two distant cousins. They've never met. One's in New York City. One still lives in Ireland in a tiny little village. But there has been a generations-long family feud. And they have to come together because it is the family patriarch's almost dying wish that the feud be put to rest. Unfortunately, there's always a problem with people when people get together. That's why Debbie hates people. But things don't go well when the two cousins, Barry, played by Paul Reiser, and Ciaran, played by Colm Meaney, when they get together. There are issues. But while the humor is there, one of the great things about this film, about this story, is the heart that's in it, and how if it's a microcosm of the world situation right now, as I said to Paul in the interview, that here we have a family, the same kind of dynamics and issues and that are going on a larger scale throughout the world. And if this one family can put their issues aside, then, maybe it can be done on a larger scale. But one of the key elements of the film, and I should have known better than to give Paul a lead line about the sheep in the film. They're sheep. The sheep are a source of great humor in The Problem with People, because of course there aren't problems with sheep. The problems are with people. It's a fun interview. It's a funny interview. Paul and Colm together are just fantastic. I had so much fun talking with the both of them. I hope you'll have fun listening to them. And one of the little tidbits within our interview is something that, if Scott's listening, he may pick up on it. But if not, I'm going to bring it up when I get him on the phone later, because it's a nice little tie-through tidbit of trivia. But for right now, you'll take a listen to my interview with Paul Reiser and Colm Meaney, The Problem with People, and go see it. It's in the theaters. It opened Friday, and it's also on VOD. So take a listen.
Hi, Debbie. Colm here. Debbie, it's Paul here. Listen, you can't tell because you're on the phone, but believe me when I say we are two strikingly handsome men.
Oh, well, and, I know that.
You don't get to fully appreciate the visual.
I know how strikingly handsome both of you really are.
The modesty of the man.
Oh. Well, I have to say, it's a pleasure. This is the first time in almost 43 years as a critic I've gotten to speak with you, Paul. But Colm, we spoke at length for The Journey a few years ago.
We were just talking about that.
Which is such a fabulous movie.
Yeah.
I'm just...
Well, Colm was just saying it was one of his favorites. One of my favorites, and in a ridiculous way to say this, the grown-up version of Problem with People, because they were actually bringing countries together, and we were just trying to bring one family together.
Well, sometimes bringing a family together is harder than bringing countries together. But
it's the same battle.
It sure is. That's one of the great things about this film, about The Problem with People, is it's really a microcosm of what is happening in the world around us. And you just hone in on just one family.
From your lips to God's ears. That's exactly. It's wonderful when you say that, because, for us to say it, it's kind of, seems a bit pretentious, to say the least. But, when someone like you makes that comment, it really means a lot to us. We appreciate it, because that was, we feel that is there in the film. And it's not imposed. Okay, I can't tell you but I will do it soon. In there.
As I'm watching it, I love that element of this film so much, but you point out the issues through comedy. And I have to say, the two of you together, you're reminding me of like a Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn with a lyrical, linguistic dance of dialogue and comedy. The two of you are spectacular, the way you feed off of one another.
I've always thought of Colm as the modern-day Katharine Hepburn. And I was once up for a part with this great South Korean director, and I went on. He loves you, blah 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 blah. So, yeah. And I went on for weeks and weeks. And finally, I said, "What's going on?" He said, "Well, it's the friends are going away." And I said, "Well, who they are?" And he said, "Tilda Swinton." I said, "What?" No, don't worry about Tilda Swinton.
Oh my God!
So my Katharine Hepburn isn't too far a stretch for me. That's so funny. But it's funny. We were so tickled. I wasn't surprised, but I was delighted to see how quickly we got along personally, but also how the music of our rhythms melded.
Yeah.
The script really it's a two-hander, and if these two people don't click, it doesn't work. And just like the characters, like we're close enough, but not identical. And in the script, that's what's the fun of watching, is like, oh, these guys are so close to being good pals, but there's something in the way. He doesn't get my joke, I don't get his joke. I have maybe some views of Irish that are unflattering. He has some view of big fancy New Yorkers that's unflattering. So it's not meant to be a heavy piece, but yeah, it is sort of a microcosm. It's like, what does it take for people to put aside their preconceptions and their biases and just get along? Because we're all the same. The Father says, we're all the same from whence we've come.
I think the way that you get around it and you bring everybody together is through sheep. Quite honestly, it's sheep. Sheep is the answer, guys.
Sheep is the answer. Exactly.
If that doesn't bring you together to your breaking point so you can get beyond it, nothing will.
Exactly. I was struck by, it almost sounds like a cliche. It's like, oh, Irish sheep. And you get there like, oh, my God, there's so many sheep. And they're just walking around. It's like, what are they doing? It's a weekday. Don't they have jobs? No. They just walk around. They just walk around and sheep of welfare. Welfare sheep, yeah, we got to put a stop.
The whole film is structured so well, and of course it starts with the script, Paul. I know, I have heard rumblings that this story came about because you always wanted to go to Ireland.
That was it.
And this is the way to do it. Write yourself a film so you can go, and of course, let Colm have a trip back home.
There you go.
Courtesy of the film production.
Yeah. Sometimes we're very simple. Actors will take a role because of it shoots, in a beautiful locale. I was watching something the other day. I don't know, it's just like, and I go, the script doesn't even have to be good. I know why this actor is in that movie. Look where they are. They're right on the coast, and they're in Greece. They're in Italy. It's like, call sheet, beach, 7 a.m. beach. Okay, I'm on board.
Yeah.
And I think people watch, and it is a little bit of fantasy for the audience. Hopefully you get the feel like how beautiful Ireland is and how lovely the people are, and it is a magical place. And I'm going back next month. We're both going to go back and do a little publicity because it opens a month later in the UK, in Ireland, but. I can't wait to go back. I loved it there so much that and all the things that I say in the movie, I wasn't acting. When Colm picks me up in that movie and he picks me up at the train station and I'm in the car going, "Oh, it's so pretty here." I actually, when we weren't filming, I just said that. I went, "Oh my God, that's the line." The line is, "It's so pretty here." It's like you can't escape it.
And it really is. And the location that you and your team found is just spectacular. Yes. That location is spectacular.
Yes. Our director, Chris Cottam, deserves a lot of credit. He found these great locations. He assembled a great crew. And he was just a very fun, silly, but very prepared, disciplined director. And so that sense of joy and fun really rippled down through all of us. And people say, "It looks like you were having fun." And the truth is, we were. We really had a great time.
I'm really curious because, as a director, it's up to Chris to kind of wrangle his talent at times, but also knowing when to take a step back and let veterans such as yourselves just have the floor and do what you do. Because of the comedic nature and the timing, you guys hit those timing beats so perfectly. I'm curious how much direction Chris gave you versus how much freedom he gave you to navigate within those scenes and those exchanges.
It's funny. He actually, we had a screening the other day and a Q&A, and he offered that. He said, one of the things that he learned was step back, because the script was working, and Colm and I, this is not our first rodeo. We've both done this, and for me, I had sat with the script for years, so I was off book. I had memorized it. I was pretty comfortable with the material. So it felt very natural. And so there was almost never, I don't remember any really acting notes of, no, you know what? I remember one and I was so happy he did. And tell me if this was your memory, Tom. When you're outside describing to Parg, here's what I think Barry did, and I think he may have killed my father. And I think he pushed you to go broad and go more cartoonish. I think he said the word cartoon. Is that ringing a bell?
Yeah.
No. Yeah. And it makes me laugh every time because Colm is such a solid force of nature, and he just really gets silly there. And we go, oh, he's out of his mind. Look at this guy. You think what? In the 5 seconds, you think he killed you? Yeah, he could have. And it is Bugs Bunny. It's so funny and so grounded. It's real. I love it. And I think Chris had a helpful hint there. I hope you were happy with Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And Chris was wonderful because sometimes he'd come in and he'd go to give it up, then he'd just look at me and go, "No, forget it.
Yeah, forget it.
It's fine. It's fine."
And a lot of people, when they think of you, Colm, they don't really think about the fact that you do comedy so well. Going back to like
What is it they are thinking about then?
they think of him more. Most of them have him stuck on the Enterprise, but but think back to films like Mystery Alaska, and you get some snark in there, especially going toe to toe with Hank Azaria.
Yeah.
You have this great ability that you can just spit out a one-liner or something with just this little bit of flair or snark, and it's the perfect amount of comedy beat that you need. You've got such a way of delivery with lines, Colm, and it's so lovely to get to see you in full force here with The Problem with People.
Well, thank you. That's very nice here. And I must say that I do, even in drama, I do kind of try to look for the comedy, because I think life is funny. I think people are funny. I think, sometimes people think they're talking absolute sense, they're talking nonsense. And, but they do it with such commitment and fervor that it becomes funny, So I do look for the comedy in it.
And I think part of what makes it so powerfully funny in Colm's performance, if I can say this to his face, is, the script is not jokey. There's no jokes. These guys aren't trying to be funny, other than the scene where they're trying to be, entertaining, and they both don't understand each other's sense of humor. But in general, what you're laughing at is the sincerity and the ridiculousness. It's like, here's this grown-ass man coming up with crazy conspiracies about his religion. And I'm like, oh my God, he's serious.
Yes.
And, he plays it serious, and that's what's funny.
It makes you, I wish we didn't laugh at Trump,
You can't, yeah.
No.
You can't.
On the flip side, Paul, everybody thinks of you with comedy, but you have, in Concussion, the movie Concussion, a very serious, dramatic film, and you had a nice little part in there.
I was there for a very strong 30 seconds, and I think it stole the film. I remember, the first dramatic role that I was ever cast in Aliens, and I think it was almost deliberate that Jim Cameron said, I need somebody that people are going to like and maybe think is going to be funny, and then they won't be suspicious. They won't look under the hood here. Of course, people went, oh, this guy's wrong. I think people look at me like the guy on Star Trek every episode that's new. They'll go, well, he'll be dead in 20 minutes. Something's not right with this guy. But yeah, I love. To be honest, the stuff I love is what straddles both. I don't think I'd want to do Sophie's Choice tomorrow, but the stuff that the guys that I grew up loving were guys who were so funny, but also would break your heart. I think of Jack Lemmon and Peter Falk, Alan Arkin, or Tom Hanks, and even George Clooney, who I think is really funny. And the guy, I'm always impressed. Like, what was some movie where Brad Pitt was so funny? He doesn't have to be funny. He's good looking and he's a great actor. But man, that's really funny. To me, the movies that I love being in and I love watching are where, like as Colm says, you find the funny in the rest of the material.
And that's exactly what you give us with The Problem with People. There is nothing strained. It doesn't feel like you're forcing a joke. Everything it's very natural and very matter of fact. Watching it, I was sitting in my living room laughing out loud as I watched it.
Oh, I love it.
Very loudly laughing. So I'm surprised that my neighbors were not knocking on my door, because some of your repartee was just so delicious and delightful. And
well, listen, don't feel like you have to keep that to yourself. By all means, share that opinion and let the people know that that's what they can enjoy.
Well, I'll be talking about this in my local bar, for goodness sakes.
Start local, and spread out from there. Absolutely.
That's just it. I'm curious for both of you. When you started early in your careers, each of you, and it's a bit of trivia I always found interesting, each of you had a small role in different episodes of Remington Steele. Here you are all these years later, and you're working with sheep. Did you ever think that your career trajectory would take this path?
I never imagined what my trajectory. You can never think ahead to a career. I don't think.
I think you're 100%. I don't know any actor that said, "Oh, I know what I'm doing. I know where I'm going to be in 5 years." Just like, no, I don't.
Exactly. And you know, obviously we completely paid absolutely no attention to the advice of W.C. Fields. You know, we're working with sheep.
Yes.
I've done a few movies now with sheep, and actually 2 movies coming out this year both involve sheep. Really? I thought I told you my age about that.
Oh my
It was
God!
a fun moment when we did that night scene with Lucienne and myself, where she's closing up the bar. It started with the sheep walking by. When we shot it, the sheep went a little nuts and sort of charged us. And I was proud to find that my instinct was I kind of stood in front of her, like, I'll take the hit from the sheep. Because I wouldn't guess, if anything, I'd throw her in front of the bus and go, ah! But luckily the Wrangler came over. I went, oh, he's coming right at us. So it's not all a piece of cake with the sheep.
No, it's not.
That's what I'm saying.
W.C. Fields was very correct. Very correct.
Yes, he was.
Greatest thing about watching the two of you in this film is the heart and the humanity that we see at the core of this developing friendship, really. And I'm curious how the two of you was there any real work involved in finding that nugget as we go through the film and we get to the third act and to the hilarious hospital scene? We really see heart in both of you come out in these performances. Was a lot of work involved to achieve that, or did this just come naturally to the two of you?
Absolutely not, Maureen. I mean, from my point of view, it was in the script, and then when I met Paul and started working with Paul, it just kind of flowed. It was not work at all. It was really a natural sort of coming together, you know, and both a great script and working with a great actor, you know.
It was great fun, and I think we were both tickled with how easy it was. Sometimes you do have to find the other person's sense of humor. We met about a week before we shot, and we just got together for a pint, and we sat and instantly hit it off, and we were talking about, we weren't even talking about the movie, we were talking about books and politics, and it was really easy. But, you know, it's interesting. In the story of the film, it starts with two guys who absolutely have this great intention of getting together and making peace. Mm-hmm. And it ends with them making a more concerted effort. How can we do this? And the middle is them fighting their demons. Like, okay, I didn't mean to be such an idiot, and I didn't mean to attack you, but, gee, you know. So we know from the beginning where these guys stand. Their heart is in the right place. It's just that they can't get out of their own way. So it was a great journey and great fun. Well, but do feel free to tell everybody to go see this. That would be a lovely gesture on your part.
Well, of course I will, Paul. Of course I will. And very quickly, because I know they're going to pull you away, I just would like to know from each of you, you've been doing at your craft for so long. What is the gift that acting gives to each of you?
Well, pays the rent, it sends the kids to college. For me, I mean, I just get great joy out of it. I mean, work like this, and most of the work I do, I enjoy. I would say 90% of it. And it's wonderful to find it. I think a lot of 90% of people don't. A job is a job, and it's a chore, and that's why they can't wait to retire or whatever. And that's why actors never retire, because we have a job that is a joy to do, you know.
And what about you, Paul?
What does acting give me?
What is the gift that it gives to you?
Well, you know, using this movie as an example, it's the experience of working with new people, and it becomes a family. You're with a group of people day in, day out, and it's very intense, and you rely on. It's very collaborative, and it's a wonderful. And on this movie in particular, everybody there was no bad behavior. Everybody was generous. We were all pushing towards the same goal, and that's again a little microcosm of what the world can be. It's like, okay, here's 80 people getting together to make this movie, to make this story, and to make these each day go as best as it can. And that's a lovely experience. And then, of course, actually playing the scenes, getting to play some of this tennis with Colm, and that's not real life, but it sure was fun to, I love him, but in this scene I'm going to pretend like I really am out to get him. It's like, well, that's great fun to pretend. So to get to do that is a joy also.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. I hope I see the two of you on screen again in the future, and I hope we get to chat again.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. So appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
And that was Paul Reiser and Colm Meaney talking about their new film, The Problem with People. It really is. It's a lyrical and linguistic dance of dialogue and comedy. These two feed off of each other. They are fantastic. There is nothing not to love about this film. It is directed by Chris Cottam. It is shot on location in and around Dublin, Ireland. It is just, it's beautiful. It's fun. Supporting cast is great. It's edited by Gareth McEwen. Cinematographers are Richard Kendrick and David Odd. And they know how to make the most of that Irish landscape. You watch this and you're going to want to go to Ireland. Especially if you find Paul Reiser and Colm Meaney there with their comedic stylings. But yes, it's in theaters. It is on VOD. See it. You will not be disappointed by any stretch of the imagination. And now, all right, I'm switching gears here. I'm going to bring the man himself on. Scott Hoover, are you there?
I am here.
Hello, my friend.
I'm not calling from the Beverly Hills jail right now.
Oh, well, that is good to know, but I think between the two of us, I'm the only one that might have to worry about that.
Yeah, I've mended my ways.
Oh, okay. Well, you could have a relapse.
I always make sure after a night out, if I'm driving home, I usually do cut through Beverly Hills just in case, because I know the jail's really nice.
I actually know some people that the Culver City jail is nice and the Beverly Hills jail is even nicer. I know some people that is part of their deals when they've had DUIs and things, they have actually paid money and their attorneys have managed to wrangle them stints in Beverly Hills or Culver City jails.
It's amazing. I knew that was going on in Beverly Hills because their jail is rarely very full. And so it's, they've got all the basic creature comforts on a higher level than most other jails. So it's kind of desirable.
Well, and here it is, folks, your PSA for the day. You want to be in the Beverly Hills jail.
If you're going to get arrested, do it in Beverly Hills.
Well,
and make it worth it.
Well, of course. But do they give room service, delivery from Polo Lounge or anything like that?
I don't think so, but I do think the police dogs are French poodles.
Oh, well, there you have it. Well, my friend, you have worked long and hard on Beverly Hills Noir, Crime, Sin, and Scandal in 90210. And I bet you had a plethora of things to pick through for this book.
Yeah, I could write 4 or 5 books, maybe more, with all the stories that there are to choose from in Beverly Hills' long history. I ended up actually with 6 full chapters that didn't make it into this volume. That's how many stories there were, and I thought I got ambitious, but publishers are picky about page counts.
Well, the thing, I'm surprised that this comes in actually at a lean 350 pages. Because I know there's a lot more you could have included here. A lot more.
Yeah, well, I specifically bypassed, the really well-known ones, the Menendez brothers and Lana Turner, Bugsy Siegel, Billionaire Boys Club, because, number one, they're pretty well-known, and number two, they are epic in their scale and scope and length, and I wanted to tell as many stories as I could. But I do want to tell those stories one day. But yeah, I did have to kind of set aside the ones really well known to the public, and I really wanted to focus on stories that you either flat out have not heard about before, or you've heard about but you don't really know to the level that I'm about to tell you.
Well, one thing to keep in mind about Lana Turner and Johnny Stompanato is the fact that so many people today really don't know. Unless you're really a classic film buff and you know history like that, or, you're a mob buff from the days when the mob really started, the Bugsy Siegels and the Stompanatos, I think you'll find few people right now in the last two generations that know anything about the Lana Turner story.
And what's interesting, and for the audience, it's in a nutshell, Lana Turner was one of the biggest movie stars of her day. She was dating a kind of a low-level gangster who eventually got abusive with her, and one night that was happening, and her 14-year-old daughter accidentally stabbed him trying to defend her mother, and he died right there on the bedroom floor. And there was a lot of controversy that sprung out of that, but it's one of the great Hollywood, scandals of its day and of all time. And what's really interesting is it's never really until this year, nobody's really done a full-on book about it. And I know, and I'm forgive my increasing senility, I forget the title, but it just came out a couple months ago. There was finally a book done. There's been threats to do movies for decades, and it's never come to pass. And it's funny because it is one of the juiciest stories from 1958 to ever come out of Beverly Hills. Yeah,
it truly is. But now I'm glad you haven't done the Menendez brothers, because there could be another chapter coming.
Exactly.
On the Menendez brothers, after Gascon has said, he may be revisiting their incarceration and their trial. So even though I would love to see you now do a sequel already, wait a little bit, because you might have new, better chapters to incorporate.
Yeah, I feel like, the Menendez brothers is a never-ending saga.
Yeah.
I don't know how far it's going to get. I think that they're, having looked at the case, I kind of came to Beverly Hills right at the tail end and worked on a little bit of the last round of appeals. And I certainly had lots of conversations with some of the detectives and police officers that were involved in the case. And I think that, the abuse excuse, as it was coined during the trial, I think that there's still a lot of, gray area in there. And I think that it's going to have to be really dissected to make a strong case to get them out of prison, because this was a premeditated murder.
Yeah.
No matter how you slice it.
That's just it. I mean, from my perspective, and as you know, my 30 plus years in law, on top of film, they deserve to be locked up. They should be locked up. And there's so many holes in a potential abuse defense. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that. But
yeah, one thing I'll say is that I know that the cops initially, like the night of, the cops that questioned them were fairly convinced that they didn't do it until the evidence started to stack up during the investigation that they did. And by the time it was all over, the Beverly Hills Police Department was 100% convinced that there was no wiggle room in this story, and this was all very kind of calculated and cold-blooded. And I know even family members differ on the accounts of Jose Menendez being. It certainly seemed like he was somewhat emotionally abusive, if not a lot emotionally abusive. But the sexual abuse thing has been very, very tricky to get anything definitive on.
Well, and it always is, because of the fact you've got the son's words against dead parents, and then it becomes hearsay with anybody else that's involved. So, yeah, it's going to be really interesting. And, I mean, I watched the trial, both trials, when they went down on the Menendez boys, and it was interesting. I was not impressed with counsel, but we'll see what happens. But you're going to have so much more for another book, Scott. You're going to have so much more.
Maybe I'll do a full, Beverly Hills Noir Menendez
version.
Just one whole book devoted to it.
But now, to fill people in, when you came out here in 94, you started your career with the Beverly Hills Courier, and you were a reporter, and you were on the crime desk. Lucky you.
It was such a fascinating moment because how do I want to say this? I was straight out of college, and I had only written very lighthearted entertainment stuff, reviews and movie reviews, album reviews, theater reviews, and then a lot of tongue-in-cheek columns. Mm-hmm. And I took this responsibility very seriously, because I was afraid I was going to screw it up and cause somebody, mostly myself, a lot of trouble. So it was, I was very kind of wary about it and stepped in. And on the flip side, the police department was very wary because they'd had recently had a rough experience with the Beverly Hills Courier. And so I didn't know that. And I kind of walked in unknowing, but really wanting to do this job right. And I think by coming at it that way, I earned their trust when they were at a high level of distrust, and was able to eventually really get some interesting stuff. I got interested in not just the crimes that were happening, but how the department was fighting them with these very, very advanced, at the time and continuing on still, crime fighting tactics and tools.
They had what you're saying is they had their own bat belt.
Oh God, they had, even better than a Batmobile. They have basically a big, huge, in case there's ever a mob takeover of Beverly Hills, which, a couple of years ago there kind of almost was.
Yeah. Yep.
They've got a tricked out, command center, mobile command center that is ready for action in case of the worst. Beverly Hills has been from the get-go, from the earliest days of the police department, they have always been on the cutting edge of technology, thanks to all of those great taxpayer dollars that they have in that tiny little town. And they've always stayed one step ahead. They're now they're doing police pursuits with drones. They've got surveillance cameras, not just their own, but they've got a network of other businesses and community surveillance cameras throughout the city. So it is, they are at the forefront of every new crime fighting tool in every era.
Well, and that's another element that makes your book, Beverly Hills Noir, that's what another element that makes your book so interesting, is because you have been there over all these years. The past 94, 2000, 30 years. I had to count on my fingers. That's what happens when you get old, just so you know. Over the past 30 years, you have been privy, so you have seen how the technologies have changed, how that also today, when we view the crimes that you talk about, the incidents that you talk about, that go back, to 1929, 1949, 1951, 1956, 1966, even into 1986, that was really still the infancy for the rest of L.A. in terms of crime fighting. So, you have a really unique perspective to see what Beverly Hills PD has been doing in the past 30 years. And as you read your book, you think about what's available now in crime fighting tools. You can just imagine how they might have been applied to some of these instances years ago, such as the Greystone Mansion and the Ned Doheny and Hugh Plunkett murder-suicide. So that's a great element, and that's something that you bring that nobody else could have brought to this book, Scott.
I'll tell you a funny anecdote that I think of with that, because that's a story, the Greystone murder-suicide is a story where the official, account is at odds with a lot of the forensic evidence, and it has a real Chinatown kind of tint to cover up, what happened since the family was so wealthy. But we'll never know. Unless somebody wrote something down and it's unearthed, we're never really going to know what happened in that room that night. But a parallel situation just a few years ago, I was at the home of the great producer Jerry Weintraub, the Ocean's 11, Karate Kid, music manager that did John Denver and worked with Elvis, and like great, character in Hollywood. And I was doing an interview with him, and during the middle of the interview, the police showed up at his front door, and there had been a couple nights earlier, there had been a stabbing at a few estates over, and they were, calling on Jerry to see if he had security cameras around his estate that might have captured what happened. That's pretty new. That's not something that was happening in 1929 or 1949 or 1969.
Yeah.
And I love the the sort of brain work that goes along with being a detective today, besides all of the high-tech tools that seem to make the job easier. But you got to be smart enough to think about these things and think about where might I find evidence that I don't have in my hand already.
Yeah, people need to go back and watch all the Dragnet reruns and how Joe Friday did it, because he didn't have all the fancy tools. A lot of it was thinking it through and piecing and digging for evidence where you wouldn't normally be digging as an average person. But you mentioned the security cameras, and boy, oh boy, they would have come in handy in 1949 with our wonderful, what name are we using this week? This guy, Jerry Dennis, or whatever name he wants to use, going from his potential list of Hollywood luminaries whose houses he can get into and rob. I love how you've written up about him breaking into Bing Crosby's house. But because he thinks Crosby's a nice guy, he moves on to somebody else.
He's such an incredible character, and I love those touches. Nobody would have known that he was ever in Crosby's house if he hadn't admitted it months later. No police report was made. That's how good he was. I love the notion that when he got into Loretta Young's house by first posing as a real estate salesman, that Young and her husband had asked to kind of evaluate the home and being let in by the servants, so he knew where everything was, and then came back in the dark of night. She had an Oscar. He could have walked out of there with an Oscar. But where are you gonna unload it?
Well, thanks to the Academy, now you've got to unload it to the Academy.
Directly, yeah.
But for $1. But it's, I'm reading this, Scott, and, as I mentioned at the top of the show, I read through the galleys when you first sent them over to me, and I was just enthralled with so much of this. Some of the superficial stuff I knew, but the detail that you go into that you would have only been privy to had you had that investigative reporting experience at the Courier and had direct contact with the Beverly Hills PD. But this also shows me you did a lot of research in putting this book together, because this isn't the kind of stuff you're just going to remember off the cuff after so many years. So talk to me about how you went about the process of writing this book, narrowing this down, because, of course, we are going to have to talk about in depth about Ring-a-Ding-Ding and Charade. Ring-a-Ding-Ding is one of my favorite chapters. Charade I love. I love your whole take through the charade and the multiplicity of things that you cover there, but Ring-a-Ding-Ding. But talk to me about how you, number one, decided to do the book, but then how you approached it from a writing standpoint, because you're not going to write this the same way that you would write a review or just a standard interview. It's a totally different animal.
Yeah, it's a long process, but I can kind of break it down for you because, I had this notion back in the days when I was working at the Courier and subsequently the Beverly Hills Weekly. And the initial idea was that it was going to be like a history of the police department and some of the great cases, or all of the great cases that they covered. And then I just realized, these stories are so fantastic, and there's so much celebrity cameo, and Beverly Hills was, from day one, a home of, rich and eventually the famous. And I'm like, this has a lot of broad appeal. And so over the years, I'd had my research because I wrote along with Police and Crime and every other thing at the Courier. I wrote about local history quite a bit. So I had a lot of research that I'd collected over time, and I'd gone down to the library, the Beverly Hills Library and the LA Public Library, and gone through old microfiche of old newspapers, when I was doing versions of these stories. And so I had stacks of files and books and everything else on hand, and then I had my personal knowledge for the things that were more contemporary. So what I had done is, over time I'd kind of taken a stab at a few of the chapters to kind of get a sense of how I wanted to do it, and I really fell in love with the idea of not just recapping these stories, but like going in deep dive, granular, intimate, put you as close into the room as I could, because so many of these stories, even the Greystone one, which is nearly 100 years old, there was so much available information. And I was discovering it constantly. And I give this as an example, the story with Walter Wanger, Joan Bennett, and Jennings Lang, this sort of producer, actress, agent love triangle that ended in a shooting. I was just reading a book for pleasure, like while I was writing this one, David Niven's memoir. I'd read on Vanity Fair that it was just a hoot to read, and I bought it off eBay and was reading it, and there was a whole passage in there that was perfectly applicable to the Walter Wanger, Joan Bennett story, and I kept having lucky accidents like that, all the way down to the last day I was, proofing the manuscript for the book. I found that little detail of Gerard Graham Dennis. I knew he had decided not to rob Bing Crosby, but I didn't know exactly the reason. Was that he had, while he was prowling around, he'd seen Bing's driver's license pinned to the the window shade of his car, and I'm like, that little detail is exactly the kind of stuff I love, and I was able to squeeze that in at the last minute. So there was a lot of this. And so stories like, Ring-a-Ding-Ding that I wrote, probably took a first stab at like 10, 15 years ago. I expanded it, and the story has morphed over time, and I was able to talk to Sinatra's publicity man back in the day who put a lot of clarity, because it's kind of a Rashomon kind of story, and little bits and pieces have come out over time, and he was able to help me kind of put a pin on it. Now, I can't say it's 100% the solution, but at 93, he had a pretty strong memory of how things happen.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go with that as like, here's the piece you need to kind of close the story out.
But I just, and of course, one of the things, classic film fans are absolutely going to go crazy. I highly recommend that they get the book and they read it. You've got Alfred Hitchcock. Alfred Hitchcock and the Beverly Hills Police. Oh, come on. You can't get more, the mean streets of 90210 than dragging Alfred Hitchcock in.
I love that story so much, and that was just a complete. I tripped over that story. I must have.
Really?
If I have a dozen, I've got so many Alfred Hitchcock biographies here that I've never seen that story before. And when I was looking for other things for the book, I tripped over that on newspapers.com. And I'm like, what is this story? And I don't want to spoil it because it's got, as is appropriate, a perfect Hitchcockian twist. But it just set the tone. It was Hitchcock. It was the police. It really hit that metaphoric feeling of, you're in Beverly Hills, you're at the top of the world, you're living this fancy high life, and all of a sudden the police show up, and your first instinct is either, what did they think I did, or what did they find out that I did?
Mm-hmm.
And that's just also thematically perfect for Hitchcock. And so it's the story's got a really fun kind of tweak to it that I hate to spoil, but I think it set the perfect intro for the book.
I agree. I completely agree. Even though, you were to a degree trying to go chronologically with these events, but no, I think you can't go wrong with Hitch. to kick off your book. Scott, come on. You and I both know that. But I just love the fact that you got Hitchcock in here. But, when we go into Charade, you touch on a lot of little things, your chapter Charade. And you came to L.A. in 94 after the Northridge earthquake, so you missed that.
Just missed it, yeah.
Now, how much aware and how involved were you in OJ coverage?
Well, OJ was an interesting thing because, as I write in the book, I actually saw the Bronco chase from my brand new apartment. I'd been in L.A. for just a matter of days and, happened to be home. I didn't have a job yet, and I looked, was watching TV and saw this whole saga start to unfold, and then I said, oh, that area he's about to drive to looks really familiar, and looked out the window and saw the helicopters and people stopped on the freeway, and I lived a block from the 405 and up on a second story so I could see clearly, and here comes OJ racing down with AC and heading to Brentwood, and I called my parents and I said, are you watching this right now on TV? And they said, yeah, and I'm like, okay, hold on, there's my new apartment right there. And that was the beginning, and being at the newspaper during that time, I mean, as you know, L.A. was consumed with the Simpson trial, consumed with it. It was all anybody was talking about or watching on TV. And so, and being in Beverly Hills, so many of those players were part of that community, stepping in and out of that community. The attorneys, the judge, people that were called as witnesses. And then we had, at a newspaper, we had the classic round of crackpots that were calling us, this tiny little Beverly Hills newspaper, to say, oh, I've got this evidence on OJ, nonsense. But we got those calls on a weekly basis. And then for me, the guy who had the best seat in the house during all of that was Dominic Dunn. Mm-hmm. And I remember I had to help my publisher go to the funeral of Ava Gabor, of all things, this star-studded funeral in the middle of Beverly Hills at the Good Shepherd Church. And as we're leaving, I get him to his car, and I'm walking back to my car, and I ended up behind Dominic Dunn talking to Roddy McDowell and Angie Dickinson about the OJ trial, and I'm just completely enthralled trying to eavesdrop on what he's saying. And his writing was such an influence on me in telling a true story against a legal backdrop and a backdrop of wealth and privilege, with style, with drama, adhering to all the great storytelling, techniques, while still sticking true to the facts. So that was, the whole OJ thing was just a very formative thing. And then, of course, later I met Marsha Clark while we were both covering the Winona Ryder trial. Just happened to be, in the courtroom and met her in passing. And then years later got to interview her when the People versus OJ Ryan Murphy series was on, and kind of share memories and get reacquainted with her, which was nice. And this, of course, she gave me a nice blurb for my book. Mm-hmm.
Well, you had a great view of the OJ trial. Imagine me. My office, I was on the 3rd floor. OJ's office was on the 6th floor at 11661 San Vicente. The day of the Bronco chase, while you are in the luxury of your second-story apartment, my car was being searched as I was leaving the building because he had not turned himself in. They didn't know where he was. They were searching everybody's trunks, their cars, to see if he had been in the building and was hiding, and somebody was transporting him out of the building.
See, now, if he had come to you first instead of AC, you could have been the one driving him on the 405.
Well, I was driving my 73 Plymouth at the time. He would have fit in the trunk, but no. The man disgusted me. He used to always rag on me. And anytime we'd be in the elevator together, he'd say, just remember, when there's an earthquake, I'm going to land right on top of you. Not really what you want to hear.
No.
But,
and especially in retrospect, it's a little creepy.
Yeah, and it's and I was, friends with his business partner and attorney, Skip Taft, and Skip was a real sweetheart. But it just, being there front and center, and every day, the news conference in the courtyard, $100,000 for the person who leads us to the killer. There's so much stuff that people don't even know that I saw firsthand. One day I'll tell you about it, Scott.
Well, even when the verdicts came in, I was on standby because we didn't know. This is only a couple years removed from the LA riot.
That's it.
And we didn't know how the verdict was going to spark some kind of reaction. So the plan was for me to go out. Once the verdict came in, I was going to go out with the Beverly Hills Police Department, in a black and white, and just kind of be ready to observe whatever's going on. And I had taken a quick break from the office and run home to make lunch, and the verdict came in, and you could practically hear the collective gasp across all of L.A. when it came in. But because it was, the not guilty verdict, there was just this sort of like dumbfounded moment where we were like, is anything going to happen? And so I called the police. I'm like, do you guys think that anything's about to bust loose now? And we all kind of agreed no. And nothing did. It was just everybody was kind of shell-shocked by the whole thing.
Yeah.
And that's a really strong memory I have of like, oh, we weren't expecting not guilty. Okay.
Yeah. Well, you lucked out because had you been here for the Rodney King riots, that was just, Scott, unbelievable. Unbelievable. I got caught in the middle of them one night at 12:30 in the morning. I didn't realize that there was rioting. I didn't realize what had happened. I'd been in an office working and was going into West LA, into Westwood. And there were riots in the streets in Westwood. And I was like, what the hell is happening? So you be glad that you missed that fun.
I moved out to Southern California just a few months after that. But I remember the story that was always told in Beverly Hills. The police department was very proud of the fact that during the LA riots, they really basically cordoned off the city of Beverly Hills. And were really checking every single person coming in and coming out of the city. Yeah. And they experienced one broken window right at the outskirts by like Pico Robertson area. And they were very proud of the fact that was the only incident of any, anarchy that made it to Beverly Hills was that single broken window at a business. Well,
Fox Hills Mall, actually, they put tanks that they got from the National Guard Armory over there on Culver, and they had tanks blocking the drive entrances to the Fox Hills Mall.
That's wild.
Yeah. And of course, who had to go driving and survey this and take pictures. But
that's a lovely job of those of us who like to report on the news.
Yeah. But, this is one of the great things, if people want to skip around in the book, in Beverly Hills Noir, Charade is a good chapter for them to start with because it gives your background and some of the fun extraneous things that help inform and give context to so much of what you're writing about.
It's funny because I really, I debated. I wanted to tell the collection of stories that are in that chapter that are things that I reported on at the time.
Right.
And they're crazy, only in Beverly Hills kinds of stories, but they didn't quite none of them quite would fill up a chapter. But I thought, they all have this common theme of somebody pretending to be something they're not. I like that. And they all kind of work together. So as I started figuring out how to write it, I kind of wanted to give that context that you're talking about for me. And I'm so unused to writing about myself that I kind of went back and forth. And I'm like, I'm just going to try it. And because Beverly Hills is such a unique and occasionally eccentric place, I loved remembering and trying to bring to life, just the uniqueness of the newspaper I worked at. That was odd and special and only in Beverly Hills. And then the experience of going to city council meetings and seeing Jack Lemmon, complaining about something his neighbor did, or talking on the phone with Charlton Heston about some little civic issue that he, had a strong opinion about, or Valerie Harper showing up at a school board meeting because her kid was in public school and she had something to say. That was when Beverly Hills was at the tail end of still being a very public facing home of the celebrities. You know, now they're kind of scattered throughout the area, but everybody lived there. Everybody went to the same restaurants. Everybody went to the same stores. Everybody was part of that community, which I gravitated to, being from a small town in the Midwest. So that eased my transition into this like megalopolis of LA very, very much. And so doing that was great. And I knew, too, I was going to talk about my own memories of the Winona Ryder trial, which was the chapter closing the book.
Right.
And I said, okay, this is as good a place as any to toe dip into me. And there's certain things throughout the book where I'm like, somebody told me this, and so I kind of present it that way. But, yeah, being in the story was a leap for me, having always been the guy telling the story about somebody else.
Well, I think that you have done a masterful job with that chapter, Scott.
Thank you.
I really admire you for that. But I love how throughout the book you bring up, Stallone gets mentioned just in context as a backstory and companion to something else that was going on. You have a wonderful tidbit in there about Gene Roddenberry. Which, and ironically, what interview preceded you? Colm Meaney and Paul Reiser. And what show is Colm Meaney best known for? Star Trek Next Generation. So, tell people about
So all the Trekkies who hung around for this part of the show. Yeah, a lot of people forget. I mean, Roddenberry is like this incredible visionary, maker of television that changed not just the landscape of TV, but how people perceive the future. And it's such an astounding accomplishment. And the fact that this franchise he created has lasted for all these years is amazing. What gets lost in that is that he used to be a police officer, among many other things.
Yes.
Roddenberry lived many lives. He was a airline pilot. All kinds of stuff. But this police officer role was an important one in getting him into television, because in the 60s when he broke in, that was the dominant form. Courtroom dramas and police procedurals were all over the air, and he knew the inside workings of both of those things. And so while he had elevated up to the level of being like the chief speechwriter for the chief of police in L.A., he was moonlighting as this television writer, using his knowledge to break in. There's a great story of how he was, supposedly, and this may be a legend, but I love it, had approached Swifty Lazar, the famous agent, and I think it was Coaching Horses. Don't hold me to that. But he walked in and was going to give him a ticket, or basically threatened him with some kind of law enforcement action. But he's like, or you could read my script, and he dropped his script on his table, and Swifty took that option, and that was the beginning of Roddenberry's career. So yeah, he was high up in LAPD, and the chief of police in Beverly Hills had worked for some time alongside Gene Roddenberry as they were rising through the ranks, and had nothing but great fun stories to tell. The chief, Marvin Ionone, who was chief in the 80s and well into the 90s, who was the guy who really, at the time when the force needed to go modern, he was the guy who got it done, because he'd had all that experience with LAPD as far as an organizational thing, and he knew how to handle big cases. Marv was the first cop on the scene when Marilyn Monroe died, as a uniformed officer. So yeah, that all of these things, it all ties in together. You can't tell a story in Beverly Hills Noir without some kind of celebrity presence. They're the culprit, they're the victim, they're a witness, they're an innocent bystander. They walk on, they walk off. It's insane, and it's not just Hollywood. It's politics, it's literature, it's art, it's people from fashion, it's all these different walks of life with all. I feel like I'm constantly name dropping, but these are the stories.
That's exactly it. And of course, one of my favorites, and I remember when this happened, your chapter, Dog Day Afternoon, and the hostage situation, Van Cleef and Arpels. And
yeah, in a nutshell for your audience, that's basically, if you've seen the movie Dog Day Afternoon, it's kind of a mirror image of it in a lot of ways. This guy, at the height of Rodeo Drive's popularity, as it was really becoming that internationally known shopping street, a young drifter, tried to rob the Van Cleef & Arpels jewelry store, which was an institution in Beverly Hills, and because the store was so impregnable and because the police showed up so quickly, he was trapped inside with the store employees, and it turned into a day-long standoff and had took some really, really tragic turns. In my opinion, it's truly the worst crime story that ever happened in Beverly Hills.
And I think I have to agree with you. I mean, I'm not surprised about the Lana Turner Stompin' Auto story. You play with the mob, things happen. This one, though, the Van Cleef & Arpels robbery and hostage situation, really, it was a heartbreaker. It was ugly. But I love the way that you approach it, and I love the way that you write about it. And even because this guy, Stephen Lividitis, Lividitis, because he was not your typical high-end jewelry store customer. You would not find him in a Tiffany's, a Van Cleef & Arpels, a Bulgari, anything like that. And I love how you wrote this, how the manager and the manager said, well, you refer to this as the pretty woman syndrome, that, okay, well, maybe he didn't look like he belonged there, but let him in anyway. And I love how you pepper in pop culture zeitgeist items that people can, immediately, they might not remember the incident, they might not be familiar with it, but you mention something like that, and it attracts their attention, because who has not heard of Pretty Woman, and who does not know that Rodeo Drive scene in the movie? So you really do a wonderful job, Scott, of peppering the entire book with things like that will get people's attention, that will draw them in even more. It's like, oh, okay, now I know what this is. And it takes off from there. You give great groundwork in each one of these chapters to put people in time and place. It's very much a Walter Cronkite, you are there.
I love the idea of context.
Yeah.
I think it helps, and just again, I'm a sucker for detail.
Yep.
And the store is a block away from the Beverly Wilshire Hotel. And during the hostage standoff, Nancy Reagan was visiting L.A. and she was there. It's like those little details are things that people can grab onto. I want to tell you, what police officer was thinking or doing when something was happening, if I have that information. But I also want to give you the sort of meta, because that's Beverly Hills. It's not just a little city with its police force and its citizens. It's this iconic, fabled place that sparks the imagination. And so I want to hit those notes, but I want to hit those ground level. This is what life is like in Beverly Hills too. It's not all fantasy. There's a reality, and sometimes a really grim reality to it.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate you saying that, because that's exactly. That's the zigzag that I was trying to accomplish, especially in that story, because it's so tense and sad, and it's still kind of haunting. It's that was I remember first hearing about it and writing about it, like it was not even quite a decade after it had happened, and there was still a lot of that still hung over the city and the police department. It was clear that the people who were there that day never wanted anything like that ever to happen again, and nothing really has.
But by the same token, we look at what's been happening in Beverly Hills and elsewhere, but the big jewelry store smash and grabs in Beverly Hills of today. Now, granted, those situations did not turn out as horrific as the Van Cleef & Arpels situation, but it very easily could have. But so I think that, writing, including that chapter and the way you have written it, I think it might trigger them and they can relate to it because of what has been happening so recently in Beverly Hills in jewelry stores.
It's so interesting, like, because I feel like today the level of crime, I don't know if it's as off the charts as some people want to believe, but it does remind me of what it was like in the 90s around LA and in Beverly Hills, pre three strikes. When I first got here, crime was a problem, and it's a problem again. And Beverly Hills has been kind of quiet. I've always got an eye on what stories are happening out of Beverly Hills, in case they turn into something that can fill a chapter of a book.
See?
And it's been pretty quiet of late for many, many years, but then all of a sudden, a couple of weeks before this the book comes out, all these strange, stories start happening out of Beverly Hills. There's these what are they calling them? Like tourism bandits that are flying in from other countries, and like they held up somebody and stole, a uber expensive watch while somebody was at the Beverly Wilshire just on a patio. And then they got caught, and the gun's been traced back to this controversial case for many years. It's just like, I'm like, Beverly Hills might have decided to like help me out for future volumes, but I feel sorry for everybody who's caught up in the crime action.
Well, I just have to say, I would never sit outside at the Reach Bev Welsh, which is the official name of that hotel. I would never sit outside to eat there for that very reason. I will eat inside. I will not sit outside because, anybody can walk right by, grab something, grab your purse, pull your watch or your jewelry off your arm, grab a necklace from around your neck. So, yeah, and it's a shame. But it's a reminder. It's a reminder. And reading stories like these in your book these kind of things happen everywhere, even in Beverly Hills. And
they sure do.
And of course, whoever would have thought that we would have Frank and Dino in the Polo Lounge in a little barroom brawl, shall we say?
It's probably my favorite. It was definitely my favorite story to write. Probably my favorite story in the book, although I'm really partial to the Gerard Dennis story too.
Oh, I know that you love this one because I know of your obsession with the Rat Pack and Frank. Yeah,
it all stems back to my days at the Beverly Hills Courier, where I was a casual Frank Sinatra fan, was aware of Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., the Rat Pack, but Dean passed away when I was working at the paper, and I had to write his obituary for the paper for the town that he lived in. And I did all this research because that's another one. I'm like, I don't want to screw this up. And I just became fascinated with his history and the whole history as it connected to the Rat Pack and Frank and Sammy. And so that began my obsession, and especially at a time when I was not totally loving popular music. I just retreated into the music of the Great American Songbook and their versions of it. And of course, these guys stood not just at the center of show business, but the center of history.
Yeah.
With their connection to JFK. And, Sinatra is one of the most formidable figures of all the 20th century.
Yes.
And so to do, to delve into this little sidebar, which, it's known, and it was a sensation for a minute because it could have been disastrous for the guys.
Yep.
But I loved telling the story of their friendship and the kind of mischievous fun that they had around town, which would frankly be frowned upon now. But as they say, it was a different time. And so they got up to some hijinks in Beverly Hills, and occasionally ran into some police. Luckily for them, friendly police encounters. But to get to this one, the guys were out having a night on the town at the Beverly Hills Hotel at the Polo Lounge, the swankiest watering hole in the city then and now, throughout its history. And in the wee hours, celebrating Dean's 49th birthday, and they were seated next to a couple of other millionaires. who often, people like that are the main prime customer at the Polo Lounge very often. And some salty language was thrown around, some ethnic slurs were thrown around, and then some punches were thrown around. And one of the other millionaires, a very, very prominent art collector named Frederick Wiseman, who had been the head of Hunt's Foods and was married into the Norton Simon family. He ends up, on the ground, crashes into a table, glass table, and is comatose for a little bit. And what it turns into, I think I mentioned, a kind of a Rashomon kind of story, because nobody tells the same story as to exactly what happened for this man to end up on the ground. All we know is that Frank Sinatra had a black eye, and the Rat Pack kind of bid a hasty retreat out of there that night. And things grew worse for Wiseman. He'd revived on the scene, gone home, but then he had fallen into a coma. And Frank and Dean had split the scene, hoping to ride out what was going on. And it's a kind of tense thing, because you just don't know if something like that's going to end your career. And, Frank had enough issues by that time of being associated with violence.
Yeah. He has a history of that.
Kind of all these insinuations of gang connections. But this could have been disastrous. And he's in the middle of his romance with Mia Farrow, who's 30 years his junior. Like, it was again, an interesting moment in time. And then there's this kind of intriguing mystery, and I won't spoil that either, but there's an intriguing mystery as to actually what did happen, which, as far as I can tell, took decades to kind of really come to light.
Yeah, we don't give spoilers here at Behind the Lens.
Yeah, we don't like spoilers.
No, everybody knows we don't do spoilers here. But, I mean, Scott, this is just so fantastic. How long did it take you to write this book?
Okay, so I had the advantage of having a few of the chapters kind of pre-written, not in final form, but in, I kind of figured out the structure and the method before I even put together a book proposal, because I just kept experimenting with it. So it wasn't until the pandemic, as you know, I've been pretty busy as an entertainment journalist over the years, and it was a matter of finding the time to do it. And during the pandemic, I was not working because I cover so many events that weren't happening.
There weren't any.
There were none. And so I had all kinds of time on my hands, and my wife was the one who encouraged me. She's like, this is your time. Like, you need to sit down and do it. And I said, you're right, as she often is. And so I set to it, and then I got the proposal done, got very fortunate in that one of my colleagues, I'm a freelancer with People Magazine for the last nearly 20 years, and one of my colleagues there is a true crime specialist, and she reached out to her just to see if she knew anybody in publishing, because she's based in New York, and she actually was in the middle of a book herself and said, you should talk to my agent, bada, bada, bada. I get a book deal within a few months, which was great. You and I know, I won't bore your audience with the details, but I had kind of a little personal health issue setback, and I lost about 3 months right after I signed the deal to write the book. So when I got healthy again, I had to scramble. So I wrote this book by and large from like February 2023 to August, the beginning of September 2023. And I had 6 extra chapters that didn't make it into the book. So I was furiously writing, and I also had the advantage and disadvantage of the fact that we had the big strikes. So again, I was kind of sitting on my hands with my professional everyday job, but I had the ability to focus on this book.
Oh my God. And
I would have loved to have done like so many more interviews and stuff, but there's so many stories.
Yeah.
That it's difficult to navigate all of that and tell all these stories in that short of time. But what was fun was reconnecting with a lot of the police officers that I haven't talked to in, 20-odd years.
And they're still around. That's a great thing. They're still around.
A lot of them are still around. A lot of them are retired, and, most of them are retired and can speak more freely and remember things that they couldn't necessarily talk about in the day because, nowadays, some of the cases, all the people are gone. So that was refreshing and just nice to make reconnect with folks. I mean, one of my favorite officers is like in his 80s now, and he's still racing motorcycles.
Oh my God!
And he was the guy who like was notorious for like getting the confessions. You know, he's the guy in the room who, not through force of will, but through gentle, a very gentle, slow, methodical approach was the confession breaker. You know, and so it was really fun to kind of hear those guys tell their stories again, and especially some of the stories I worked on, and I didn't know every dimension of it, you know, until now.
Well, how fun was that for you, Scott, when you had a basic knowledge, you had a reporter's knowledge of some of these stories, but there was still stuff you didn't have because the police couldn't divulge it and they didn't want it to come out. But for you to now hear it and discover it all these years later.
Yeah, I mean, these stories have been living rent-free in my head for, you know, a long time. And to find, I mean, nothing gets me more excited than when I get a new nugget, even if it's just going to be something that adds a sentence, you know, or a paragraph to the story that wasn't there before. But especially, like, sometimes it can be maddening because you're like, okay, this new information means I've got to rewrite X many pages because it changes everything. But it's so, I mean, and I know and I'm sure you can relate, when you write something that is, you know, in a moment in time, and this is history, something's going to come out that's going to blow up something in my book, right? Like I can only work with the facts that we have at hand, and tell the story that way. And then eventually there's going to be some crazy revelation that breaks, and I'm going to be like, my chapter is completely wrong now, but I'm glad I know the new reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a double-edged sword. I had that happen on a few occasions in law, writing briefing. When after I thoroughly researched something, I've got a brief or a motion written, and then all of a sudden, a new piece of information comes through in the discovery process, and it just totally blows everything else to hell, and you got to redo it.
And what's funny is when that big revelation, I have a story that didn't make the cut for this book, but there was one big revelation, and as soon as I came across it, my reaction was, aha, that makes everything make that much more sense.
Yeah.
You know, there's like little things that I hadn't really thought too deeply about because they appeared on the face of it to be what they were. But then I find out the little twist, and you're like, oh, okay, that puts everything in a new light, but it also makes everything make so much more sense. And I love those kind of discoveries. Oh,
I mean, those are the best kind of discoveries. So how was your book signing? You had a book signing on Friday night at Book Soup. How was your book signing?
Yeah. We had a good group. They had to put out more chairs, and that's always a good thing. But yeah, that was really fun. I had a lot of my friends and colleagues showed up, plus some customers of Book Soup. Got to tell a lot of the stories, talk about some of the things you and I've just talked about. Had a really, really fun time, and I was really gratified that the shop seems very bullish on how it's going to appeal. At least here in LA and in Southern California, they think this book's going to have a big appeal to their audience. But I think hopefully it'll go further because so many people in the book are like people you've known about your whole life.
That's just it. And as I said before, that's one of the great things because you pepper the book with context, and the context on a book about Beverly Hills is going to draw in films, names, classic film history, rat packs, jewelry stores, the lives of the rich and famous, but is told on the mean streets of 90210.
The not always real mean, but when they get mean, it can brutal.
Get really mean. Yes. So now I still think you need to talk to Larry Edmonds' bookstore, and this book and you need to do a book signing there.
Yeah, and I got to follow up because I did speak with the owner there, and I know a book was sent to him by the publisher, so I have to follow up. Thank you for reminding me about that.
Because that is the seminal place for books on Hollywood, and everything in here is essentially, it falls under it's maybe 90210, but it falls under the auspices of Hollywood.
It's so steeped in Hollywood history, and even like weirdly the history of the movies.
Yeah,
there's so many movies that came out of these cases, were directly or loosely inspired by these cases. Movies that affected the fortunes and falls of the players involved. Books, literature, these things have a ripple effect that the enormity of it hadn't dawned on me until I was really writing, seeing all the stories line up. And you're like, wow, like even in a crime in Beverly Hills has a life that ripples out into the culture.
Yeah. But I mean, you take a look at this, you look at things like Joan Bennett, and you bring out things about all of these players. In all of these, what films they were in, you give people all these touchstones as they're reading it. And so much of that, you got Hitch, you've got Joan Bennett, you've got the Rat Pack, all of this, and it all falls under the bigger umbrella of Hollywood. So you definitely, Larry Edmunds Bookstore. You need a book signing there.
And even Winona Ryder's kind of a classic star at this point.
Yeah, especially since she's had a great resurgence.
She really has. That was a case that was interesting to look at just because I was able to kind of look at it with more empathy than I might have when I was covering it. Mm. Because it seemed like such a spoiled movie star move. But when you look into what was going on with her, and you look at where she was coming from, even just, historically through her whole life, but what was happening with her in the moment, and then the way she weathered it. I have a lot more compassion and empathy for her that I don't have for people like Stephen Leviditis at the Van Cleef.
Well, yeah, there are some people, they do not deserve empathy, sympathy, or anything else. They're just criminals.
Yeah.
But one thing I do want everybody to know about is you have some incredible pictures in the book, including one of Alfred Hitchcock being escorted to a holding cell. Where else? And it was legitimate. It wasn't set up on a soundstage at Universal or anything else. But you've got some incredible pictures here. Contained in here, and you dug all these pictures out yourself. You had to hunt and find them, what you wanted to include, and I don't think people really appreciate the amount of time that takes to go digging for and then get clearances for the pictures that you have included here. They're really wonderful, Scott.
Thank you. With extra props to all the people that work at the libraries and archives. That, I was able to work with to get some of these things. But yeah, it's a treasure hunt for sure. It's, some of the pictures came from the Associated Press, and they had to go back and look at their negatives. They didn't have them in their digital files yet. They hadn't seen the light of day since probably when they were first taken and run in newspapers and put on the wires. Same situation with the LA Times archive at UCLA. I was going in, literally looking at negative photos in a folder from different periods, and they were able to help me zero in with the clues that I gave them to where to look, and finding like pictures from the Joan Bennett and Walter Wanger case, and from the Jerry Dennis. Nobody knows the Jerry Dennis case anymore, but it was a sensation, and there were plenty of good photos to choose from. So again, those things have not probably been seen since they were in the LA Times in 1949, 1951. Yeah, and to find those, and then I'm on a budget, and so I turn to the the standard archives here and there. The Hitchcock ones were really difficult to find. I went to CBS. I went to a lot of different things where I thought they would have them, and nobody quite knew, because there was definitely again, no spoilers, but there was a press element to the situation, and so I thought they had to have been photographed. And finally, I found one. The nice folks at Getty Images gave me a really, decent break on, and then I found a couple more in the Everett collection. But they were, they were last minute finds for sure. They were very, very tricky. But I wanted those. I knew they were out there, and I wanted them so bad. I
know you had sent me some of them after you got them, and I was just gobsmacked at a couple of them that you got. But this is just such a great book, Scott. You have done a tremendous job. I'm impressed with it. Come on, I bought it. Paid full price for it.
And I think your audience knows that, you're not easily impressed. So I'll take that as a very high compliment.
Everybody knows I'm not easily impressed. And if it sucked, I would tell you that, and you know that.
Oh, if it sucked, you'd tell me that, and I wouldn't be on your show.
Well, I would let you. I'd have you on the show, and I would spend the whole time trying to rehabilitate you.
Why didn't you know that this is common knowledge that this happened is what I would expect?
See? But I love the book, Scott. I wish it was in a hardback. I really do.
If there's anything I wish I could have talked my publishers into, it would have been that. But I'm pretty happy. Because these stories have a pulpy feel, I kind of like the pulpy nature of the book.
Paperback, yeah. But now, I hate to say this, but I did find a couple typos.
Yeah, that's a thing, man. You can't beat it. I can't tell you how many times I personally went over this.
I found some typos and I cringed.
Yeah,
I'm like, oh my God.
You and me both. I had to edit a couple things. Like I had an excerpt that ran in Vanity Fair and on the website, and I had to, I was editing it down to like half the size of the Greystone chapter. And, these little things that you find, and I'm like, I've looked at these stories 100 times. Other outside eyes have looked at these stories multiple times, and it drives you nuts. It drives you nuts.
Believe me, I write something, and then looks okay, and then I do it in a preview mode. It looks okay. Then I look at it in, on the back end again, and it's like, oh, God, how did I miss that? And change it, then I look at it, and I go back and forth until I'm bleary-eyed. So I know exactly how you feel.
So what we do to fix this is, I believe I can fix it for the Kindle edition. Anything like that I find, I can go through and fix it for the Kindle edition. But also, if you guys, your listeners and I'll just go out and buy that first run, I can get it fixed in the second edition.
I was just going to say, in the second run, in the second edition, that's easy. So I'll actually send you the page, and I'll actually circle in red. I'll print out the page and circle it in red in my little hybrid manual style, and I'll send it so that you have all the little typos I found.
I imagine too, like as a writer, you know the experience of looking at something that you were satisfied with when you wrote it, and then you look at it again, you're like,
nah, I don't like it.
Just this word, if I just move this word and that word. But I mean, I spent a year doing that, and I'm never going to be satisfied. So it's hard. It's like anybody. It's like watching yourself on TV or listening to yourself on audio. Going back and looking at your own writing can be maddening sometimes.
Hey, I've got almost 10 full years of Behind the Lens shows. I have never listened to me on the shows. I don't.
I very much relate, because I cringe. I cover a lot of red carpet events and things that need sort of an immediate turnaround, and having to sit down an hour after doing an interview with somebody to transcribe it and hear my own voice and relive the experience is to me the worst part of my job.
And don't you just love it when you're transcribing, or even when I do the TCM red carpets or other red carpets, and those I have to go through and listen to. So if there are issues in there for editing purposes, I can tell Lydia or whoever is going to edit the video, Okay, we got to take this out, take that out. But don't you hate it when you listen and you go, God, I sounded like an idiot. Why did I ask that? Or why didn't I ask that? That's one of the pitfalls.
I'm very big on the why didn't I,
Yeah.
or just even sometimes the way and I do that. I do this all the time.
Yeah.
Like, and especially in the heat of moments, like I'm on red carpets and kind of flying by the seat of my pants all the time, and I do okay. I've managed to have this career for over 20 years, but sometimes you hear yourself, I'm like, is that the clumsiest possible way I could have asked that question?
Yeah. And of course, you're as bad as me. Neither one of us write questions out for interviews. We don't write
Almost never.
I have never written questions out for an interview. Never. In 42 and a half years, never.
Every once in a while, if I'm working for a client where I know I need, and especially for a video, if I know I need to hit certain points, then I just do, because that's what they've hired me to do. But if it's just me, I'm in charge of the interview and the story that's going to come out of it. Yeah, I prefer a conversation. I might make a note, like hit these topics or something. But I like the conversation. I like to be able to listen and not worry about what my next question is supposed to be. And listen to what they say so I can know where to, let's go here. I wasn't planning to go here, but let's go here.
Yep. That's exactly it. It's the whole idea of it forces us as interviewers, as journalists, as critics to listen, to pay attention and listen, and to be able to follow up and respond accordingly, rather than and you and I have both been in situations where people they're just reading questions off a page, and even talent goes, didn't you hear what I just said? Yeah, you and I have both been in those rooms before.
Yeah, well, and it's, I being now like one of the old war horses of the red carpet, it's really a place where a lot of people get their first experience. And so I see a lot of young, kids basically on their initial foray into entertainment journalism, and they've just been armed with, a laundry list of questions by their editors. And sometimes, these editors have never set foot on a red carpet, and they don't understand that there's an ebb and flow to a conversation, and there's a way to ask questions, and there's certain things that you might be able to ask and get a reasonable response, or they're going to come off as absurd or invasive or rude or whatever. And you have to learn how to do it. And I feel so much empathy for these poor kids who nobody's told them any of this. Right?
Which makes you wonder.
Been thrown on a red carpet.
Well, it makes you wonder how the editors got to be editors when they don't understand that.
Yeah. It's a fairly common phenomenon, even at high-level publications, though, that people that are behind the scenes in the editorial offices have never had to deal with the things that they're asking you to do. And, I'm lucky that my clients tend to be wise enough to say, hey, this guy's got his more than 10,000 hours. And if he didn't feel that it was right to go here or to go there, then it definitely was not.
Yeah. No. Well, I am so happy that you took all this time to be on my show. Was this pressy enough for you?
This was very pressy. I knew that you would interrogate me thoroughly. Sometimes I've been interviewed by some of those people we were just talking about. Showed up with the list, and that's fine because I know where to go with that. But yeah, I've had a few really really fun, lengthy, in-depth conversations like the kind that I like to have, and I knew I'd get one of those for sure talking to you.
And just so people know, he actually sent me a message a couple weeks ago. So, are we going to do something pressy about my book? Of course, we're going to do something pressy about your book. But I wanted it timed to the book. I wanted people to at least have a few days to go out and get it in advance with some of the advanced PR that you did, so that they would have an idea what we're talking about. And I think we've given them all great ideas. Now, the only thing to be done is we have to hook up so that you can autograph my book for me.
that will be pretty easy since it's a very short drive.
Yes, it is. And you know where you can always find me.
Backstage. Will they let my dog in?
Absolutely, Nimoy can come in. No, seriously. Seriously.
Yeah, I feel like you need to meet. I feel like you need to meet Nimoy.
I need to meet the Chipette. But
yeah, he's a legendary character in these parts.
He's a legendary character on social media. Well, my friend, I'm getting ugly looks from Pam. Since we've only run over 41 minutes today.
This is going to be a test of your audience, but I feel like we were fascinating enough to make it worth it. But we will apologize to Pam, and I'll let you do your wrap.
But thank you so much for coming on the show, Scott.
Thank you. This was a blast.
This has been such a joy having you. It's not often I get to interview a friend, a colleague, and now a soon-to-be infamous author of Beverly Hills Noir, Crime, Sin, and Scandal in 90210. You should actually pitch this to TCM, too. Just saying.
Yeah.
Just saying.
And I'll be back with Volume 2 as soon as it's done.
Thank God. Thank God. You, my friend, you go have a great rest of your day. You know where I'll be later today. But give me a holler, and we will get together one day very, very soon.
Excellent. Thanks, Debbie.
Thank you, Scott. And this has been Scott Huver, author of Beverly Hills Noir. All your bookstores on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Get it, read it. You guys are going to love it. Thank you, my friend.
See you soon.
Bye-bye. So, I think this may have been the longest show we've had. But for a book like this, and Scott and I have known each other 25 years. We've worked together in interviews, junkets, red carpets. It's a wonderful book. It truly, truly is. And anybody who gets it and reads it, you're going to love it. So, that is more than all the time that we have today. I will be back next week. Who do I have next week? We're booked up through the end of October, so we got people that are going to be joining us over the next few weeks. So, until next week, I'm Debbie Elias. This is Behind the Lens. And Pam lost the music. Pam lost the music.